You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Get down. Ayun na. That's the trabajo. Ayun na. Vámonos.
Hi, everybody. Hi, this is Mike Balzer, and this is all things 3D in review for what is today, 6/29/2018. And I thought I'd start this off by showing two trailers for what I think is probably the most powerful thing about VR or immersive experiences. And both of those are obviously events that have taken place. One more current. What would it feel like to be in an immigrant or an illegal immigrant at the border? And obviously, they're trying to replicate that experience again to put us in their shoes. The other one is an Anne Frank house, which is more of a, what would you call it, an immersive experience, kind of a static immersive experience that they 3D rendered a bunch of, I guess, assumed, since the location no longer exists, or at least it's been fabricated or remodeled based upon information from Anne Frank's diary as well as other people of where they actually lived. And what's important in both of these experiences is that you are put in the environments. And in the case of the former of the two trailers, there's obviously a lot of animation and facial tracking and everything in order to make you feel like you're part of that experience. The other one being a house where you go from room to room with a static presentation that you can look around in, and then a narrator. I think both of them are extremely powerful, and that kind of moves me into the direction of this particular title of this particular episode, and that is virtual reality going the way of 3D printing? And the reason I make that point is, many of you who are watching this because you're very interested in 3D design, 3D scanning, 3D fabrication, obviously 3D visualization, which includes virtual reality and augmented reality, as well as other forms of visualizing 3D content. You're probably seeing a lot of talk in the media that the VR world is going the way of other devices. In other words, it's not becoming very popular. And if you remember 3D printing, which just not that long ago was going to be the boon in the way that we were going to obtain products. We're all going to have 3D fabricators or 3D printers in our homes, and then we'll be able to download files. And the next thing you know, we have products. Well, sadly, that doesn't seem to be the case. And you really don't hear about 3D printing unless you look for the news. And so, are we moving in that same direction? A lot of attention. However, you may have noticed that world of VR is waning, and now obviously AR seems to be taking over. But is that even true? So let's kind of go into our first article here, and let me bring it up. And this is The Economist, and basically it's another Debbie Downer that talks about, I guess the person starts off by talking about E3, which wasn't that long ago, and talks about where we're at. And as you can see, there's a chart of the number of units sold, and obviously Daydream and VR are the ones that are sold the most of. And then as you start to get into what would you call it, static or desktop versions, actually it's a game console, meaning the PlayStation VR. And then you see that you're not even approaching millions in HTC Vive and Oculus Rift. So again, when you see these kind of numbers, and then the concern people have that, oh, it's not like reality, it's too hard to set up, it's too expensive, a lot of negatives. As I've said before, quit your crying. Well, maybe not so harsh, but essentially, if you have my years of technology experience, you'll remember back in the days when something like a Commodore 64 set you back $500 to $600. And if you remember the graphics and quality of that, but people thought it was cool. And I think this is what we need to approach VR with. And again, those of you who may be watching this show has already bought into it. And for some of you, you may have already put it back on the shelf and said, nah, this isn't for me. Then obviously the craze with augmented reality. But right now we're talking about VR. TechCrunch also did an article in August of 2017 that says VR cycle is dead. Obviously a little more distinct and concrete that they feel that it is dead completely. And again, same arguments. These prices are coming down because they're not selling well, and then obviously the number that are available. And then on Reddit, anyone notice a shift or decline in anti-VR rhetoric? And then obviously they've taken a take. This is cool. This is dead. This is actually cool. The classic cycle, which I think is funny. And as some of you who have been around a while remember in the 90s, VR, yeah, actually it was sort of towards the end of the 90s. VR again was in the news, and or actually, I guess it started in the news, went from the laboratory to possibly people buying it. So that was the first cycle. I think the second cycle, you may or may not have remembered, was eMegan's Z800, which was an $800 unit that you could buy that had true stereoscopic panels, as well as a IMU. However, the software package and the fact that it wasn't pushed that dramatically onto the desktop platform at that time, the PC, it just didn't take off. And then now we're back in, what was it, 2013, 2012, and obviously the current date. And a lot of that stems from the technology that we've been able to utilize in our pocket. The fact that IMUs not only have become smaller, compact, and lower power, but actually have performed better. And if you don't know what IMU is, inertial measurement unit, which is a unit that provides the head rotation. And then clearly tracking, inside out tracking as well as outside in tracking, the HTC Vive, the Oculus, and the one that I think is probably the most unique and should be one of the more popular, because you don't require any actual tracking inside, is the inside out tracking in the Microsoft mixed reality headsets. But this is all, in my opinion, still in its infancy, and it's still going to grow. So if we're not going to see a huge penetration in the consumer market, how is it going to continue to grow? And I think this article talks about it the best, and that is in the enterprise market or professional markets. And clearly, we're seeing, especially with, not especially, but the Microsoft HoloLens, the fact that the HTC Vive Pro had been priced a little more expensive to penetrate. We're looking more in the professional market, meaning AEC, uh, design, engineering, medicine, and other forms, research, that we're starting to see these products starting to gain some traction because, as I have mentioned over and over again, these are the most important areas that we should look at because we can now visualize and construct things without ever fabricating. And this is why I've kind of covered these in parallel. 3D fabrication is great, especially personal, or the ability to go to a 3D print service bureau because it allows us to create something tangible. But what if you're not at that stage yet? Because each prototype costs money, or at least tangible prototype. So let's say you could prototype within a VR environment, apply physics, and I've talked about this over and over again. And I think this is the market that we're going to see, and not as much in the game area because I think people are happy at just looking at a screen. It's the same thing that they thought about 3D movies taking off, meaning stereo projected. And even though they're still out there, that still isn't the mainstay of the market. So I think it's going to continue to be a niche. And until something comes along that you just put on your face, requires maybe a battery charge, no wires connected, and you're up and running and you're in the virtual world with the performance of a PC, and I don't see that happening for a few years ahead now. And even though there are penetration by companies like Oculus with their Oculus Go, obviously Google with was it the Lenovo Mirage, and then HTC Vive with their compact unit. But again, these aren't low cost units, the latter two, but it does provide inside tracking. And it's still the Cubemaps type approach until we can get into a very more compact form that has uh, a all day battery and is easy on the eyes. I think we're going to still have some issues with that. But in the enterprise and professional market, I do see some penetration. And I think this is where we're going to see most of the research that comes into place. Well, that leads me into my updates from the past. I don't know if you remember me talking about VR engineers or VGineers. They had talked about creating a headset. Well, it will now be available, but for a what would you call it? Uh, Hard swallowing $5,800, if I remember correctly. In fact, if you press on the VR or the order now button, $5,800, and then professional support package. So they're really looking at providing a professional product. But what do you get for this professional? Clearly, one of the promotions is that you get a 5K resolution, two quad HD high density OLED displays, custom built optics um, that are non Fresnel VR lenses, deep immersion 170 degrees, a automatic IPD system. Essentially, it tracks your eyes and places them. I I don't think that I personally think that's extra engineering. That's not necessary. Embedded leap motion so that you have hand tracking. But what it doesn't have is inside out or outside in tracking, which they're saying can be provided by, I guess they have voice command, by more professional tracking systems. But there's no reason, well, actually, I guess there is. Clearly, you're not going to be able to go with an HTC Vive because they didn't actually put the sensors inside the unit itself. So that's a lot of money. And even though it looks interesting, I don't see this looking any different than some of the other headsets coming from Oculus or HTC Vive or some of the other companies. The lenses themselves, that could be interesting, but are they worth thousands of dollars? Now, keep this in mind. This device at 5800, even though it looks interesting and the resolution is decent, this is a company who just announced today, and we've talked about them before, Pimax, who just said they are ready to move forward with manufacturing. They've kind of ironed out some of the bugs. So, what are they thinking for timeline? Do they even give a date? It may or may not say. I didn't go through it all the way. Here we go. They're looking at, they don't actually have a date frame, but it will be later on. They're saying that they're working, obviously, what they say, 11 hours, 6 days a week. So they're really moving forward to try and get this out. But as you can see, they don't really identify when this will be available, other than they're going to be moving into the last stage. So if you remember, the Pimax is creating as they call it, an 8K. As we know, there's a lot of disputes on what that means. It's actually two 38 by 40 by 2160 panels. That's the reason for its unique shape there. Side by side, fed with I want to say dual port. I keep saying that. Let's see what it says. Not HBI, but geez, I don't know why I had a problem with this earlier. Where's your specs at? Yeah, of course they want to continue to promote it. So one of the things that here we go, tech specs. So the DP1 1.4 dual port 1.4 setting USB 3. I notice it does not say that it supports HDMI. One of the reasons HDMI 2 does not support 8K. HDMI 2.1 will, and maybe they couldn't get a hold of the chipsets for that. The dual port 1.4 does, but this is where I'm a little concerned, interested, is how they're going to support, uh, as they say, 90 hertz when we actually have some issues of 8K on 1.4 actually handling that. And then on top of that, because you've got such a massive bandwidth that's involved with this, how are they going to be able to provide more than a 2-meter cable, which is what dual port 1.4 specifies, without some type of amplification and other techniques? And yet they're providing, if you notice in there, let's see if we can go back to it, a 10K. So I mean, that's not the purpose, is to criticize this system. The main point is that we have this system here that's going to cost $5,800, while the Pimax 8K is only going to be, let's just say, if we just look at the 5K, about $500 if you got it on Kickstarter. I don't know what the final price will be. And so, other than they're looking very similar, they're and the fact is, we don't really know if this will be another continuation of a Fresnel lens, unlike the previous version, or not the previous, I want to say VRgineers. I don't know how the crystal is that. These obviously is going to provide a very sharp quality lens system, which I think is very important. Sadly, I find Fresnel lenses have a softer, and then if you've got such high resolution as they show here, screens, it kind of diminishes the final output. But again, is the more important point that you're going to have a wide FOV. Again, my concerns is, will it be able to support 8K at 90 hertz? I think that's going to be questionable. However, the 5K shouldn't have any issue with doing that. And both of those should be available soon. Again, a lot of the beta testers are under NDA to identify what they have found. And so we're just going to have to wait on it. But I think some people are going to be disappointed. But again, you're not spending $5,800. So that's kind of interesting. The other thing is, remember, Chinese manufacturing, one, they're very efficient. Also, it's lower cost. The unit here, I think, let's see if they identify it, is going to be made in the EU. So clearly that probably drives off the cost of manufacturing. And so I think that's probably a bigger thing. Plus, they're pushing this into the professional market. I guess they're thinking that professional markets don't look at the bottom line. I don't know. Um, they may actually have a longer warranty. Don't know, but to me, I don't see this being worth $5,800. And the Pimax may be biting off more than they can chew, but again, at under $1,000 for the 8K version, about $500 for the 5K, that's a lot easier to swallow. And if they can actually do this and it's halfway decent, it'll be very cool. I will play a wait and see. As mentioned before, I had a 4K unit and was very, very disappointed with it. Okay, well, let's move on to our next item. Yeah, and this is Road to VR, who actually brings it up. You can go out to them. All these links will be in the show notes when we get done with this, but they talk about this as well. All right. So let's get on into 3D technology. Let's get back into audio. We talk a lot about the visuals of VR, but I personally feel after working with as a developer in both, it's important to provide very realistic audio. I thought this was kind of fun. Let's see if I can play this with a. So, yeah, there's a nice little video that you can watch. But essentially, audio has played a large role in making movies scarier. The soundtracks, where the sounds are located, and as we were able to put in Dolby, as well as other surround sound systems, we were able to provide even more scares because we didn't know where the sound or the audio was coming from in the theater. But then when we created games, we also had that ability. And the fact is, with a VR system, you literally have something on your ears. Spatial sound is extremely important. And what they're saying is that this allows them to actually identify and put the camera where they need to and allow the sounds to uh, kind of identify without actually having visuals of where something's at. And sometimes just having an audio sound can be much more scary than the actual visuals. And if you combine the two together, that can create an extremely frightening experience. And we're seeing this, as you know, in Breath of a Forest, a app that I'm working on. I find that sound is very important when you're outside. For instance, one of the things that I tried to capture was the creek, the sounds of the creek flowing, the birds in the trees, the rustling of the leaves and in the breeze, and so forth. And even though you can just drop sounds into Unreal and others, there are several engines. Steam Audio is now available. Renaissance, no, Resonance, excuse me. Audio is now available. So there's a lot of 3D audio engines that you can apply in Unreal and Unity. So I would spend some time doing that. There's actually some free tools. We've talked about them before from Oculus, including Adobe has some great tools for creating spatial sound in 3D videos, 360 videos. But for gaming, you can do a little bit more because you can physically locate your sounds on both your X, Y, and Z planes and determine exactly where they're at, create occlusions. There's all kinds of fun things, and I'll probably do a tutorial later on. But keep that in mind if you're developing, that audio is extremely important. And I'm glad to see that we're starting to see articles that kind of show the importance of 3D audio and what they can be used for to convey, in this case, scares, but anything else that goes on. So let's move on to 3D in design and architecture. And I thought this was interesting. This is, I guess I can play the video here. But essentially, they've scanned the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation is a movie of a particular architectural placement. So they're scanning an entire area so they can show some of the architecture work from Frank Lloyd as it's scanned. And they talk about how they used a Leica geosystem to do so. And they feel this is extremely important to capture the entire 3D perspective of an architectural representation that's in the real world. And as you can see there, even though it has I don't know, I would say it's a certain quality that I find from captured um, systems like the Leica and a few other systems that use laser tracking, 3D scanning capability, it does allow to provide an accurate model that you could probably convert that as we've done with the occipital, but I guess it's kind of a Leica commercial there. But this is a good example of it. Also clearly in newer versions that everything is done in CAD systems, we can basically take those models and create something hyper realistic as well. But anything that was designed, let's say in the 40s or earlier, this is the only way to actually capture. And we've seen this in creating artifacts in ruins in Greece, Syria, especially important in Syria right now with a lot of these things being destroyed. Another example was in Iraq, where people just destroyed them just to destroy them. So this gives us the ability to scan and archive something other than just 2D images. So another experience here that you can kind of look through and how they went about actually creating it. All right, let's move into 3D in medicine. I thought this is very interesting. Essentially, they 3D fabricated a small capsule so that they could put a drug or other form into it. And then they coated it with titanium and nickel being for its magnetic properties, allows them with what do you want to call it, the electromagnetic field, to be able to position it in an organic subject. And even though the main article here cost money, there's enough here to show they were using it in a nude mouse, and they were able to show how they tracked it and moved it to a particular location. This one up here is they used basically moved it into a zebrafish from here's where they want it, position A, and then move it into position B. And here they show it actually being moved there. So this will give physicians the ability with very little intrusive surgery, the ability to impregnate a capsule or something into the human body, or even animals per se, that allow them to move it to a location. So they could put it into an artery, a vein, other tissue as well, and just literally move it into the location they want to. And then I don't know if it's triggered through a magnetic to release it or if it's dissolved. The fact that it has titanium and nickel coatings, I don't think that will be the case. So there must be some small opening or release system for it to be released into the bloodstream or the area that this particular medicine is required. So I thought that was pretty cool. The fact is that they 3D fabricated it and then coated it afterwards. We've seen that before, and using other techniques, electroplating, in order to take a 3D plastic object and then 3D plate it. So it's probably something similar to that. All right, moving on to the next item, 3D and scanning. I thought this was extremely interesting. This is the Vivo Showcase. It is a time of flight 3D sensor. This is very similar to the not the HoloLens, which may actually use time of flight, but the Connect version 2 was a time of flight, and then obviously they're coming out with another iteration for the professional market. And the promising thing that they're indicating is that you have thousands of more pixels than what you have in the Apple version or structured light. We've talked about that before. In fact, they say you have 300,000 sensor points, which is 10 times that in existing structured lights. That means you get a better definition. So I've got a few little videos to show. So this one here, very quick, but we can go back. So essentially they used an app. You moved your head, it would scan it. Now keep in mind, this was a phone that's being used, and this is something that even though is possible with the Apple version, one thing that you'll see here in a little bit, let's go into the next one here, 3D mapping. Oops. this. There we go. Okay, so let me bring it in. So here we're using mapping. So he's mapping the person's entire head, and they're showing lights. So again, these are very, very brief. I'll go back and track. Here they have a phone, looks like on a circular hub, and tracks around the individual. But again, this is a phone that's doing this. In the past, if I've watched this show or familiar with the occipital 3D scanner or the RealSense scanner that was built into a few laptops and tablets, you literally had to walk around them. It was little more bulky. In fact, if you remember, I created cases so that you'd be able to use a phone and the 3D sensor. But again, it's not all contained. Here, other than being put in a mount, you do have the ability to basically pull out your phone and do 3D scanning. But here's the most important thing, and let me jump to it. So again, these are very quick, so I'm going to go back in a second. So essentially, if you start, the person clicks on an icon, the phone is mounted in front of the individual, which more than likely the tracker itself is on the front part of the phone on the screen. But then if you notice, they projected the screen onto a big screen, and now they're able to do something very similar to the Connect, which means they're able to interact. And this is all based on the phone. And that's the important thing. You have up to, what do they say, 3 meters, so about 9 feet that you're able to scan in. And obviously you can articulate different joints. Now, again, this is all within the phone here. So not only would you be able to do joint animation, character animation, but you can do facial animation and facial scanning all from your phone. And again, I went back to the article here, and it doesn't really say. Uh, Basically, if you click on the link there or go out to Vivo, it doesn't actually indicate what phone it's in. So I don't know when this will be available, but the fact that they're showing this off in a small format type phone, I think is extremely interesting. I look forward to finding more information on that. But if you have been looking at some of the other, or actually the iPhone 10 and what people have been using it for, this could be a very interesting on not only the Android side, but also better quality. And so I'm really looking forward to that. Okay, so let's move on to our VR corner. We got a few items to cover here. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, and did I actually download it? Shoot, I didn't. So we're going to have to play it here. So I want you to look at this, and I'm going to expand the window so you can see it. Okay. So here is standard AR. And one of the things is, even though it has anchored to a plane, as soon as there you go, as it moves around, it moves in front of it because it doesn't have the ability to occlude three-dimensional or real-world objects. Now, what they're saying here is that this system has the ability of doing so because of some cloud-based learning system that it's created, so that it can create a realistic presentation, as you can see there. And then they show it a little bit more over here. And here's another example. So I want to go back, and you can look at it yourself. Now, let's see if I can do a little frame. Okay, that's standard AR. Okay, so there you go. I kind of picked it up. If you noticed, it kind of doesn't really, if you're familiar with using the occipital mixed reality system that we've talked about in the past, as well as some other systems like the HoloLens, the way that it does occlusion is that it maps the world first using its depth finder or depth mapper. And so then it has a map essentially of all the objects here, kind of like a wireframe. So it knows where the objects are in some rough detail. This is not how this is being done here. What they're doing is identifying using the camera objects and saying, okay, that is a pot with plants in it, or that's a chair. And let me go back and show you. But I wanted to show you that it only identified a generalized object and it still only gives a partial occlusion, not an accurate, like a true occlusion, you wouldn't see any of the object here. But because this is running at a faster frame rate, you get the illusion that it's actually ducking behind a plant. But as you can see there, it is more of a mass object instead of a fine granular that you would see normally in real life. And let's jump back to it and see if they give a little bit better demo. They don't, but we can go out to their website. Oh, where is it at? Okay, so here is where they kind of discuss their system, where they actually use the AR to determine, for instance, this is a chair, a table, a monitor, or just a flat object. And by doing so, they can basically create a map of the entire chair and know that they can place objects, as you can see there, even though this is a flat plane. But then they could move behind it because they've determined that it's a chair, it is so big, and then they can create an occlusion block there. So when the actual object goes behind it, it causes it to disappear when it goes behind that particular object. But it's not a actual mesh information that you see, let's say, in the occipital structure sensor or other types. And so it's kind of cool. I don't know how quickly it takes to determine and figure out what each object is and then create an occlusion map from this. I don't know if that was prepared earlier, the video that we saw, but if it's fairly quick, this could be extremely interesting. And again, the effect is a generalized mask. It's not a very detailed mask, but for something that's animated and moving through, it provides a far superior experience than what we have now in AR, which means it just appears in front of any object. So I'm looking forward to that, and that seems to be a very neat process. And I've signed up as a developer, so I'll be able to talk more about that soon. And the fact is that you don't need any special hardware. And if it's 2D, you'll be able to process it, especially if it's being done in the cloud fairly rapidly. So again, looking forward to that. All right, here's the next item. These are kind of some education things. Google's free class teaches you how to create AR experiences. So one of the reasons that I'm looking into this is this August, I'm going to be doing, in conjunction with OMSI, a VR, or as I call it, VAMR experience, kind of a weekend, uh, you want to call it, learning camp at the OMSI here in Portland, Oregon. So teaching kids, or actually older kids, and teenagers how to do VR and AR development. So I've been looking at ways for curriculum and so forth that I could look into. It appears Microsoft is going to be offering something similar to kind of launch their mixed reality system. And so these are like course curriculums that you can go out and watch. And it says about 15-hour walk through the 15-hour program to teach you how to create AR projects using AR Core. So actually, I think I might look into this. So it's very interesting. I might want to go out and take a look at it. So let's see where this takes you. Okay. I will join later on. Okay, something else. Can AR and VR pilot from Google prepare kids for future careers? Again, along the same premise. Here they're talking about using AR in a New York school. Um, But if you remember, we talked about it previously on an episode. Google Cardboard, they had what they call their Pioneer program, where they literally came in with a cart with the phones and the Google Cardboard to take kids different locations around the world and then interact and then talk about their experiences afterwards. Some people thought that that wasn't really going to go anywhere. Actually, it was called Google Expeditions AR. Was Okay, so Google Expeditions AR. So again, using the tools, using the existing hardware, um, which can, I don't know what the cost would be to the school, but something very similar. So again, I'm going to look into this more, but there's another opportunity there. And then finally, if you've been following my, what do they call it now? The VR LapPack, which is essentially a frame that you can put your VR ready, uh, like a 15.6 or smaller laptop onto this frame, which allows it to be well ventilated. So you're not actually putting it in the backpack. Um, but one of the things that was important, and I'll go ahead and show it, was this little dongle here. This is the dual port version. And essentially, this has to be connected to your laptop, and which means that you have to have at least two external video output ports to fool it into believing there is an external monitor. So that way you can close the lid on your laptop. That has been a problem for the system. Now I've gotten around that with my own VR budget backpack as well as the my belt pack using the Nook system is by using a small 5-inch or 7-inch touch tablet, but then you have to figure out where you're going to put it on your body. If you're using a laptop, you could do that as well. But I use one of these and it works really effectively. Then you can close the lid, put it on your back, which I'll bring up here in a moment, which is really cool from the perspective that you don't need any extra hardware if you've already got a laptop ready VR experience. And again, keeping it cooled by keeping the frame open. So I will bring that up here in a second, but I wanted to get on to this article. One of the things that was pointed out in the fall release, so if you are on a preview uh, fast track, you should already be seeing this already, but if you haven't, supposedly by the fall edition, we're going to, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, I'm not going to run through it. These are some known issues. There we go. As for mixed reality, you'll no longer require a physical monitor, which is something that I asked Kip earlier. Why did you not build that on earlier? And now, a year later, you'll be able to do this. So essentially, close your lid on your laptop or unplug your monitor if you've got a device that you can run off with. I guess some of the other backpacks out there either did what I did, which was have a small little touch screen, or they found out the hard way. They disconnected their screen and then they lost their VR experience because the Microsoft Mixed Reality headset basically drops out. So, like I said, you can get around that until the fall by using one of these little phantom ports, but you would need an extra port on your computer, which is not a problem. But on laptops, it could be because not all of them have dual video outputs. Some of the better gaming laptops do, so that shouldn't be an issue. So on that note, let me kind of can't even talk, jump back to my main screen. So here we go. And I'll give you another peek at 2 items that I've been working on. So here's the backpack. So this is a rough form. I'm going to be actually doing a little bit of braze soldering I tried to use epoxy, but as you can see, it actually broke. But this was a $15 mesh keyboard or laptop stand so that you could elevate it at an angle. I broke off some of the pieces to it, and then this is epoxied as well. And then essentially a couple of Velcro straps. And then there's one that goes around the sides. So essentially these wrap into the keyboard area, and then you can still type on it as well as use the touchpad, and then close a lid, put the other bracket or belt across the top of it so that you won't have any lateral movement, and then you're ready to go. So if you were already plugged in with your VR or headset, you'll be able to go. Now, the problem with using a laptop, if you're not already moved in that direction, is a laptop does not have an external power output of 12 volts, which is required for the HTC Vive. Not on the Oculus, but it is required. And also the HTC Vive as well as the Oculus have still require, especially the Oculus still needs to have the cameras plugged into the device. So it's not really meant for mobile. The HTC Vive obviously could be used for it, but you require a 12-volt output. So most laptops don't provide that, and you'll need to provide some other form of output. So using a laptop for the HTC Vive has not been practical. That's why I think the mixed reality headsets have been great, but then obviously the big problem was you couldn't close the lid until my little trick with the Phantom monitor dongle, or when the fall release comes out. But the other thing is just putting a laptop into a backpack, you're enclosing the laptop and eventually it will shut down because it'll overheat. This will not do that. My end goal is to create a custom machine panel here with fixtures for to make this a little easier to work with. But if you've got $50 and want to get started now, I have I'll put it back in the show notes, but I have an Amazon shopping list that you can go out to and buy these. It's not that difficult to put together. Basically put some bolts together to hold it in place. I can't remember what size I used, but obviously you don't want them protruding too much, otherwise they'll stab you in the back. Haha, kind of funny there, huh? But there you go. So not the most glamorous, but you don't see this once the laptop is on it. The other cool thing is you can, even though the side panels here are a little bulky, you can continue to use your laptop. Just put it down on the table, open up the lid of your laptop and type away because the straps won't get in the way. Tried it already a couple of places and it worked okay. I had some issues with using my Unreal demo in Steam VR, but that's a problem. Now, something I heard from HTC is that they're having problems with the HTC Vive Pro with laptops. The only thing I can think of is that some of these laptops may be underpowered to be able to use the HTC Vive and its higher resolution, but then you may just have to downscale. I don't know what else it could be, but again, the HTC Vive, you literally can't hook up to a laptop unless you have some type of additional power source, a 12-volt power source to power the laptop. So, and that's not difficult to do, but using just a laptop, that would be impractical. So moving forward with that, the other thing I wanted to show off, remember I mentioned that I found a low cost, what do you want to call it? Adjunct power supply, supplement power supply. This is an OEM, but if you notice, it's a 20-volt battery pack, lithium ion, that powers tools. So they're very inexpensive. In fact, this is only $35. It's a 6 ampere per hour and literally provides about 45 minutes of additional power, 45 to hour, but I think 45 would be better, to your laptop. You literally, if you have the proper connector, and I don't have the actual specification, but you can get adapters or the actual coaxial connector. And I found a place on eBay that some guy 3D prints these for about $10, which was far better than me having to 3D print it myself. But there are things out on Thingiverse, models that if you've got a 3D printer, you can do it yourself. But I think, God, I can't remember the name of what these are compatible with. Let's see. But this is made by Mitchell.com. And again, I'll put a link in there. I guess he sells it on Amazon as well. But this fits a DeWalt power pack, 20 volts. Slips right on. It's got some mounting screws inside, so you could put it on a wall. Or what I will do is mount that to a belt system or my backpack, and then I'll just be able to slip these in and have additional power. I plan to put one on each side of the belt, the backpack. So I will have 12 amperes per hour, about 2 extra hours of battery pack. And again, just plugs right into a battery pack or the laptop and provides additional, like it was an AC power source, and continue your laptop going. And again, the whole price of this is 45 bucks. You can buy more expensive batteries, but these OEMs seem to work fine. But again, keep in mind, not all OEM batteries are of equal performance. So you need to go on Amazon and make sure you find one that's well rated. And again, this is, I'll put this in the show notes, but Mitchell.com is the guy that makes these. Just 3D fabricates them, so hats off to him. He provides the wire. I put a couple of crimp connectors on the end of it, and then a little coaxial cable that I found, and it worked great. And I also used it on my Nook, and as soon as I get my Hades Canyon, it should work fine with that as well. And then with that, I'm going to create a dual system with a small USB converter circuit that'll add to the cost, but the whole power circuit should be about $50. And then it will tell the Nook that you've got a power source hooked up to it, and it will tell you and shut down your system softly. If you try to hook one of these up otherwise, yeah, it'll work, but your computer won't know when this thing has depleted, and it'll literally just shut down harshly, and that could cause a corruption in your file system, and your machine may not boot up. So I don't recommend using this unless you time the amount of time that it takes for this to shut down. The other thing is, don't try and parallel this with a, let's say, a power receptacle so that you can continue to use your machine on AC. That will either destroy the battery or the charger itself. And the reason for that is you need some type of Shockley steering diode, and then I could provide information on that if you're interested. But keep that in mind. Just don't hook the two up in parallel. That can be disastrous. One or the other item will not function. And one final other thing, yes, it doesn't look attractive, but this is something I have been working on, and this is my, uh, I don't know what you would call it, but this is essentially a stripped down HP mixed reality headset to its bare components with my head strap on the back of it, and it is far lighter than the HP or some of the others. Very compact. Why they didn't go this direction? Obviously, this is bare bones. It would need a case around it, but even the case didn't need to be larger. So I don't know why they continue to make scuba diving type mask when they should be just creating a smaller lens that basically seal the sides of your eyes and much more compact, and it literally feels like there's nothing on your head. And that's been the direction I've gone with the Noti VR and other things. But I've been playing with this. Sadly, even though I took out the two cameras, and they are functioning, but it has erratic inside out tracking, and I don't know exactly where that's coming from. The only thing I can think of, sadly, they don't provide any tools, at least to the developer or the consumer, to look at the cameras. Either I broke it and only one camera is working, but I've been able to put my hand in front of them and cause it to disturb it. So I don't know if there is the positioning that I have not looked at versus the IMU, which shouldn't make any sense, but maybe because I have repositioned it and had not had the capability of calibrating it, I may have something off there. Sadly, I don't have really good inside out tracking with it yet. So there you go. It's very compact. So I don't know why they keep making these things huge. Okay, so what I was going to do now is kind of give a tutorial on a couple of things that I've worked through, and that would be, let's see what else we're going to look at. One is the update, which we just did, and then the other one is an update to something I gave up the meetup last Wednesday, and that was, let me bring this back. Okay, I've lost my mouse. There we go. And that is, if you remember, if you've been following some of my tweets, I've been working with John Carmack. Actually, I requested to work with him on something called a 5K encoder. He literally has created an encoding system that takes 360 video that you want to go ahead and match the same 5K. So if you've got an 8K output, or you have some way of capturing scenes like I did from Unreal, just map it to 5120 by, was it 2560, and create an equirectangular from that. And then you can go ahead and download his SDK. We were able to figure a problem with it, so no one else has complained about it. So you can download that. Tools work okay. He does have I guess I want to call it a slicer, his stripper program that is a binary, so you don't have to compile it. And then, however, you do have to compile the Android APK, but it seems to work properly if you ensure that you have all the proper Android uh, developer things from, what is it called? The Android developer tool. You can get it from Google. The problem I had is that when it's loading properly, it will see and locate things that you don't have and download them, but it does not give it permission to use them. So then you have to get out of it, go back into the what's it called? The APK, not the APK, the SDK uh, management tool within the Android development system, and make sure that you give it authorization. Okay, so view dependent videos. So essentially, you can go ahead and read about it. But I have two examples. I will have it in the show notes. It's out of my G Drive that I had created. They're about 30 seconds a piece, and they were specifically in the Oculus Go. You could possibly use those on the Galaxy S8 and above, but you're going to have to compile it with your Oculus signature, where I guess you don't require an Oculus signature for using the Oculus Go, but you do need to be in development mode currently. I do plan to create Breath of the Forest as a passive VR experience, and I will probably use this. Quality of this is superb. He literally matched the quality of the video to the quality of the LCD panel in the Oculus Go, which is a 2560 by, I want to say, 1440 screen. So literally 1280 by 1280. And again, if it's 25 by 60, you double that 5120, and that's where he came up with the particular video format. And his article talks about the whole process itself. Essentially, you bring in your MP4 at 5120 by 5120 over under here, and it strips it and creates um, 10 components, as well as a base video that you can see here. So there are a bunch of strips, and the way this works is you rotate your head. You literally put in 3 strips at a higher detail, so you have higher quality, while the rest of the scene is at a lower quality, and that's what provides the performance and the detail that you don't have in some of the other viewers, because they're trying to push all of the pixels at the highest resolution. And so there are some other techniques being used in the cloud to provide 8K, but again, it has to downscale to whatever the resolution is of your device. And then the rest of the experience is of a lower quality. But the fact is, you can encode it yourself now for free. Jump on it if you're looking into doing some development there. Okay, so let's see what else. So we'll get to that in a moment. So let's jump to my, where's my screen at? Okay. So I don't know how well this is going to work. I'm using a different system for it, but I found I will use my laptop. So I will launch the Breath of a Forest that I put the mixed reality system in. So let's give it a moment, which then launches everything else. We're going to so I can't change that, so we're going to have to leave that. Okay, so this is the Breath of the Forest based on a Unreal developer demo file, and I've added to it. So this is it. So I've been using it for other examples, and here I've added the mixed reality camera, which is right here. And if this works, I should have an output, which I don't. So let's get these out of the way. So what makes this unique with the system, and I'll go through how to actually get it in a second, bring it up. You find your video camera, and I have a 920, but it tells me no formats are available because I have double streams. So let me capture the right stream. There we go. And there I am. So then I can go to view. Whoops. Let's grab this and jump down to a higher quality signal. So we'll go 30 frames per second. Boom, full screen there. And then we'll minimize this so you can see. And then you see down in the lower end, I am now in my scene there. Pretty cool. And then if I go to, and this may or may not work, I had some problems using another camera, but let's go ahead and go into the VR experience. Let me find my headset. So this should bring up a VR or a projection. There you go. Whoops. Well, I didn't. Well, you get the idea. So essentially, I should be able to put this on and look in my VR. But if I clip the background a little bit better, which I didn't, but I can show how that works.
Settle in,
but here I am.
and notice your breath.
There we go. So I'm in my
Sometimes,
VR. Now I
just
can
by
go
noticing
through and
where in your body you're holding tension, it's possible to gently release the muscles.
But
and let it go.
I can
So as you
do certain things with this.
You might feel your
Put
breath
it right
slowing
here.
and deepening just a bit. It's so peaceful here.
Oh, that's right. I'm
So
using
tranquil
this.
and soothing. Notice the dappled sunlight through the trees.
Huh, that's interesting.
And
I didn't
sense
want
the
to
air
use this
temperature.
camera. All right, let me see if I can get it to work with the other camera. Okay, so let's see what happens here. So the thing that the mixed reality video system uses, the MRC video source, and I'll show you exactly where you can find all this. Now, I found in this version versus the Mixed Reality 4.18, they didn't actually provide you a map. So that makes it a little more difficult to work with. So you can choose your different video sources. I chose this here. Huh. but it tells me I don't have an actual video source because I guess, since I have two different streams, yeah, so it's exactly what the issue is. So I'll leave it on that. So the problem is I'd have to shut down my webcam on the device itself so that it allows me to utilize the stream. And because I didn't actually tweak it, which I can do right, actually I have to go into it. Okay, so let's go through the steps real quick. First, you need to go down to View Options and make sure that you're looking at your plugins as well as your C++ classes. Once that occurs, then you'll be able to see the actual folders. But before you even do this, you have to go up to Settings, Plugins, and find it. And let's see where it was at. Didn't virtual production? No. No, I can't remember where it was at. There it is. So under VR, you need to go in Mixed Reality Capture Framework, enable it. We'll ask you to restart your level, your editor. Once that's done, you can come back into it. Then obviously make sure you have your C++ classes visible. Then go into Content and then locate so you can see my head moving around in there. You can see where's it at? Maybe it's in the classes. So let's go to public. Okay, so there is a media reality capture actor. You drag that into your scene. I hope it didn't crash. See, there's another camera. I won't go ahead and do it. But that's your actual camera. Once you drag that into your scene, then you can go ahead and click on it, that camera, and then you'll have all your other features available to you. However, some things that aren't in there are some other features that are required. See this MRC video processing. This is I'll go ahead and bring it up. This is a blueprint that shows how the camera is actually created. And then it gives you outputs, and they give you, or they're off here on the side here. Let's go ahead and look at it. And then if you go down here, you can make a child or an instance of it. I would highly recommend that, and then make all your changes in that instead of messing with this. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and then actually open up, oops, didn't want to do that, up my instance. And then we'll look at some of the features here. Okay, and then there's, let's turn that into a plane. Let's see if I can find, there I am. Okay, but you notice how the background changes because as I move my head, my camera is trying to compensate for the brightness. Also, it's a different camera than when this was originally tweaked. So I'm going to go to the video source, or actually up here. This is your chroma key sampling. So I will be able to go back to my VR source here, select a background, okay, and then hit OK. Now let's do this first, just in case it doesn't take it. Hit OK. And then if I go back to the processing, yep, so it's a little better now. So as you see, I have now applied it to kind of like the clipping point for my green screen. Can't even talk. My green screen, as you can see behind me. And I am now located in the scene here. And then I can save it. But there's some other features here that are kind of cool. You can tweak this even more. So you can tweak the edges and the threshold. like that. So notice how the edges are a little cleaner now. And then you can also create despill. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but essentially if you don't set it, let's see what we can do. Let's go straight. If we make this too low, notice how you can start to see green in my, where it's reflected off my hair. So I'm going to tweak it a little bit so that it goes away. It might be still a little bit in there. And then you can also change your control. And actually doesn't seem to be doing much in this. And then the sharpness, which is the edge itself. Okay, so I'm going to leave it alone so that we can run through it, but you would tweak that to get the best edge and the most accurate color representation. Now, keep in mind, this is probably only a 1280p camera. If you've got a 1080p camera, it's highly recommended that's the camera that you work with. That will provide a sharper edge and more detail. For my example here, as you can see, it's pretty good. And I have tried a USB 3. I can't think of the name of it now, but it's a HDMI to USB 3. But I found that even though I can get it set up for the testing, as soon as I go into actually using it in the mixed reality, which I'll go back to. So if I go back here, all right, so let's shut this. Let me save. Okay. Okay, so there you can see my little screen of what I've captured. Now I haven't messed with the actual resolution. I've just left it that way. But now if I go into play, I should have a better screen. There you go. There's some water. Some water over here. So if I had this set up correctly, or I could actually reposition my camera, I'm going to put it on a tracker so I'll be able to move around my video camera so it'll be tracked in the VR world. So my positioning here, I can actually change where it's at in the VR world. The camera, if you notice, doesn't seem as sharp.
Settle in.
There's a couple of reasons. Also, if you notice, I seem a little more elongated than the previous. I don't know where that's at. I do know there's a few more adjustments that you can work with in here, but I don't know if it's still because it's in beta form. But I am able to basically superimpose myself on my Unreal background. And then again, if I add a tracker to my camera, I'd be able to reposition the camera and watch it change in the scene. And so, yeah, it's coming along. The thing that wasn't included as it was in the previous version is a calibration routine so that you can calibrate. Let's say if I had a controller in my hand, even though I'd be able to move it, if I had the controller mapped to, let's say, a gun or some other object, it would not track it because I have not calibrated that. So you would have to be able to map that to it as well. But then if you notice, the edges aren't really clean. And again, I put in a forum post to ask about that so that we can come up with better. So as you can see, it can work. So let me run through the steps really quick again. Let me drop out of this. Okay, make sure that you turn on the plugin, which is located in your virtual reality folder. So here, I'll bring it up again. Okay, so where are we at? Oh, plugins. There we go. Plugins. Go to your virtual reality folder. Find the mixed reality capture framework. Enable it. Then close. Again, if you have not enabled it in the past, you will restart your editor. And then once that occurs, make sure you go over here to View Options, enable C++ classes. Once that's done, the folder will appear over here. Look for your private folder in your mixed reality framework C++ class, or if you're creating a blueprint, or if you have another pawn or something, but this one's already created, just copy this over. Just drag and drop it onto your scene, and then you'll have a mixed reality camera. Since I've already done that, I don't need to do that. So I can click on it, and then you can go through the different settings. And sadly, I don't know why this doesn't go away. Let's do that there. So if you look down in the bottom right-hand corner, which my head is, so let me reposition myself. Give me a moment. Position me. Wee. Okay. All right. So I'll put myself in the middle here. So on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, which may be the right-hand side since I have a mirrored background. The right-hand side of your screen is all your settings. The one that you need to go to first in order to enable your camera is this one here, which we had up and running already. And notice as soon as I come out of it, it goes away. You want to create a playlist as well as a media source so that every time it enables, it actually brings it up properly. I'm going to do this from the beginning. Find your video source. We're going to use the one that's built in. And then we have to make sure we select the right stream. Now, if you've only got one video camera, then this shouldn't come up. It only came up because I have two cameras hooked up. And then I will select stream 0. And there you go. And so now I'm set up. And now I could go back into this. And as you can see, my mixed reality camera has a full 16:9 because it saw it immediately. And then it just has a cast over the actual screen here of my mask. Then your other features, you can actually put in lens distortion. So if your lens has some distortion, you can clean that up. And then the video processing, like I said, create an instance of it. But you want to make sure that this is set up properly, and then only use your instance, don't use the main one. And then you can also drag in a garbage mask. And if you're not familiar with that, a garbage mask allows you to basically mask out the garbage. So let's say in my example, I didn't have a full green screen or I didn't have it illuminated properly, only around myself. That way I could clean out the edges so that it would only be my unreal background and not the noise from poor lighting or whatever the case may be. So you can set that up. And again, I don't know if that's complete. I played with a little bit and I didn't actually get it to work properly. And then there's some other features. You can set it up so that, I don't know if it's here, so that it auto hides the player. Also, you have the ability to enable it so that it's attached to the HMD, which I don't recommend. You want it to be set up differently. And then obviously, if you wanted it to be set up with a device, you would have to have input, or actually not input control, to be assigned to a particular tracker. And again, if you're going to do something like that, and I haven't worked it out yet, you're more than likely have to create a new blueprint, a new pawn, and attach the actual libraries to that so that it tracks with it. And I'll probably do that in the next week, and then I will have an actual tracking cam. Out of the box, it doesn't seem to have that capability. But like many things in Unreal, you can make your own. So there you go. You can go through all the settings. And then again, the actual content is located in the Mixed Reality Capture Framework content. And you can see here your key alpha, as mentioned, the MRSI video processing. There is 2 of them. Again, make your own with the instant. I have mine's called Instant 2, but you can call it whatever you want. And that will actually save everything for that particular instant and background. So if you have to move to different camera scenes and so forth, you just create a different one with all the settings for that particular environment. So it's kind of neat that they set it up like that. And then obviously there are other things that you can look at, but most of them are already included. But the one that confuses me a little bit, and there isn't a lot of details, the MRC video source. You can not only capture video, but you could also capture a camera, or you can set up a static image. It is something that Unreal's had for some time, but it's not consistent. As I said, I tried to hook up a USB device and it didn't work right. All right, so that's it. So the other thing I worked on, which I don't know if I can show, is I created a new cube map. And essentially, I had taken a 360 with my Pixel 2 out in the woods near me, and I basically captured a full sphere using the camera. Now, I could have gone out there with another type of camera. So, on that note, let's kind of go back to what I was at. So, once you have your, let's get back to my your actual output from your, let's see, your 360 capture camera, or if you're using your phone to capture the 360, you have to take that and run it into a converter. Unless you've got Photoshop, it's easy there. Just bring it into that, convert it to a 32-bit, and save it out as an HDR. But if you don't have Photoshop, there are some free tools like this one here. It's a web-based tool. Just drag your JPEG 360 file to it, and then let it convert it into an HDR, and then download it. Uh, if you don't want to use a web tool, there is a free, easy to convert tool. What do they call it? Donateware. And then you can download this, and then it will convert a JPEG into an HDR. The results seem very similar. And here's the JPEG that I originally used. This is when I was out on a Henry Hag Lake on, what was it, Monday. In order to capture this, I used the Instant 360 camera. And so I was able to just drop this in. I can't show you the HDR here because I didn't load up the tool, but I guess I could do that real quick. Let me bring that over. Oops, wrong one. Okay, so I will actually set it up and run it. Okay, so I will minimize that so it's closed. Okay, so I'll be able to bring it up here in a second. So again, this is a little program, but then if you have no way of viewing your HDRs, which I don't because I don't have Adobe Photoshop on this, you can get Bracket. Again, another donate piece of software for both Windows, Mac, and Linux. You can then download this and then have ability to view it, which we're going to do right now. So I will bring up and bring it over to this screen. So this is what it looks like. Kind of crude in its look and appearance, but I should be able to go out to my data drive, my podcast folder, and then my episode for today. Where's it at? Okay, and then there's an HDR, so I should be able to view it. And you can't see that, so there we go. Sorry about that. And there's the HDR of it. And sadly, it kind of messed up my system here. Okay, so let's see if I can do this again. Well, that's not good. Well, let's see if I can bring it here. And the problem is it put it in the wrong screen. There we go. Okay, so this is the output from the HDR. If you notice, it is obviously brighter than the previous JPEG, which I can switch to. So as you can see, it's much brighter. So I don't know, does it have some tools? We can adjust the tone map. So let's see what we can do here. We'll adjust the gamma down. So this should be better. Can you see? Okay, so it's only giving me a preview. So let's go to 1.2. Let's adjust it, and we should see a different here. Unless my whole system crashes. Otherwise, I'll say goodbye. Okay, so it's still taking a while. Okay, so if this functions, we should have a different, there we go. So I'll bring this over. So notice that my tone map is a little more like this one. So you could play with that more, but obviously I was able to adjust it so that it matched more of the 8-bit RGB, and as you can see there, better quality. Now, why am I doing all this? Once I've created an HDR, Unreal now has the opportunity, let me jump back to, and I'll jump back to my screen here, and let me go to my folder, of adding your own panos. So let's see, I've got a couple here. So let's take a look at this one. So I'll bring it up. So once you import it, hmm, well, well, that's good. That's what happens when you do this live. Things don't always work right. All right, so why? Hmm. Well, it appears my system has frozen. Well, you can see it there. So essentially, you can bring it up. What I would recommend is if you want a better quality, if you can see, you can actually see the trees in my Cubemap, is push it up to 2048 by 2048. If you leave it at the 0 setting, what that will do is just basically create a 512 by 5. Oh, there we go. Took a little while. All right, so here's the one that I created from my own scene. And here's where I was talking about maximum texture size, 2048. So I would suggest doing that, and that's 2048 for each of the cube map settings. And then I also did a compress and then use DX11. It normally comes up when you bring one in as far as an RGBA that is uncompressed. I don't know if there's any performance gains in doing so. And then you can adjust some of your settings here. I had to desaturate my settings on this particular one because when I brought it in to actually my scene, it was basically um, fluorescent. So I wanted to tone that down, make it less saturated. And this is the results of it. And as you can see, it came out pretty good, kind of adds to it. And more importantly, let's see if I can rotate the camera up. The sky looks a little better. Uh, Actually, this is the wrong one. Actually, so let's see. Let's do this. Sorry about that. this one. Well, I guess I could have just brought them in the other way. Okay, so here's my new trees. But notice how I have a nice blue screen and it looks more realistic as you look up. So that was my goal, but notice the trees are a little more fluorescent. Sadly, or not really, Portland has more fluorescent screens or trees screens. Okay, so that's what I added to it. A little more dense foliage, as you can see, but more importantly, I have blue sky now, and it looks a little more realistic as you look up, which was my goal. And so on that note, that's about it. And let me jump back to my main screen. There we go. And I think that's about it for today. If you got any questions, go ahead and email me. Otherwise, probably next week or the week after, I'll be back. If you're in the Portland area, our meetup, when we're going to be talking about augmented reality, I'm hoping that Josh will be able to give us a presentation on his ability to interact in an AR environment. He's got some very neat ideas. He owns a HoloLens, so we'll get a better experience with that. That will be 6:30 to 8 on the 18th of July. So if you're in Portland or the Portland area, please head out. Otherwise, I guess I'll see you in a couple of weeks, if not sooner. All right. Bye. Enjoy your weekend.